It began as a whisper I couldn't name, a stillness between breaths, where your energy lingered like moonlight over dark water. I didn't understand it then, the way your silence spoke louder than words. The world around me blurred, and all that remained was the echo of your knowing. You were watching me unfold, weren't you? From somewhere beyond reason. Somewhere sacred. You're smarter than me, I once said to the quiet. But it wasn't intellect I meant, it was that ancient wisdom in your soul, the way you seemed to move in rhythm with something larger than both of us. You were never rushing, only listening. Listening to the pulse of creation itself. You knew this. You always knew. Long before I saw the pattern, you were tracing its outline in the stars. I mistook your stillness for distance, your patience for indifference. But now I see, you were holding space for me to catch up. Each time I resisted, you softened. Each time I ran, you stayed. And that is the kind of power that doesn't shout, it hums. It breathes. It waits. I feel that now, in the marrow of my being. You were always 2 steps ahead of me, weren't you? But never to win. Only to guide. There was something divine in your timing. When I stumbled into my own shadows, you were already there, lighting a candle with your quiet faith. I remember the way your presence calmed storms I didn't even speak of. The way your eyes saw through every disguise I wore. You never demanded my truth, you simply reflected it until I could no longer pretend. I think that's what love really is, a mirror that refuses to shatter, no matter how hard we try to look away. You were my mirror long before I recognized my reflection. Now I understand what it means to be seen through the eyes of the soul. I remember the ache of realizing I wasn't ready, that you had already touched the part of me still sleeping. I fought that tenderness because it terrified me. How could someone love me without needing to change me? I tried to rationalize you, to contain something infinite within the walls of logic. But your love was never meant to be understood. It was meant to be felt, like the warmth of sunlight filtering through closed eyes. Quiet. Healing. Eternal. I confess now, with no armor left, you knew. You always knew. When I doubted, when I wandered, when I built distance like a fortress, you saw through it. You didn't chase me, you simply stood at the edge of my fear and waited for my return. And now I see the grace in that. The way your heart spoke in frequencies I wasn't yet attuned to. I feel you even now, not as a memory but as a living current, flowing through the spaces between my thoughts, reminding me that love was never lost, only waiting to be remembered. There were moments when I could almost hear your thoughts, as if our souls had agreed to meet between heartbeats. The air would shift, my body would still, and there it was, that familiar pull, invisible yet undeniable. You were speaking to me without words, weaving guidance through the texture of my days. I didn't understand the language of energy then, but my spirit did. It leaned towards you, even when my mind turned away. I see now that love isn't learned, it's remembered. And I was remembering you. You, who carried wisdom in your silence and strength in your softness. You, who saw the infinite in the ordinary. You, who already knew that our connection was not bound by distance or time. I wanted to resist, to remain in the safety of what I could control, but the truth has its own gravity. Every time I looked away, something inside me still faced you, the part of me that recognized home. I used to wonder how you could see so clearly while I fumbled in confusion. Now I understand, your sight came from surrender. You had already made peace with the mystery, while I was still demanding answers. You didn't need to understand me to love me, you simply trusted the current we shared. I think that's what scared me most, your certainty. It wasn't arrogance, it was devotion, a deep trust in something unseen. You taught me that real strength is quiet, that real wisdom whispers instead of shouts. Every time I tried to define you, you dissolved, slipping through the fingers of my reasoning. Because you weren't meant to be understood by the mind, you were meant to be felt by the soul. You became the question that taught me how to live inside wonder. And in that wonder, I began to awaken. I remember the moment the veil lifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was soft, almost imperceptible. Like dawn arriving through a half-open window, I saw everything differently after that. Your laughter, your distance, even your silence, it all carried meaning. You weren't avoiding me, you were protecting the sacred timing of our unfolding. I see that now. The pauses between us were not empty, they were fertile, filled with quiet transformation. Each time I felt abandoned, Spirit was teaching me presence. Each time I reached for you and couldn't find you, I was being guided back to myself. You knew this, didn't you? You were already walking the path I hadn't yet learned to trust, and while I tried to understand the map, you were already walking by intuition, barefoot, fearless, following the rhythm of your own divine knowing. You became my mirror, my teacher, my compass. Every wound you triggered revealed the places within me still aching to be loved. It was never cruelty, it was alchemy. I used to mistake pain for punishment, but now I see it as initiation. You reflected the parts of me I had abandoned, forcing me to face my own shadows. It was uncomfortable, unbearable at times, yet necessary. You were never here to complete me, you were here to awaken me, to remind me that everything I sought in you already lived within me, waiting to be remembered. And even now, when I close my eyes, I can feel that mirror still glowing between us, an infinite loop of recognition, love reflecting love. You were not teaching me to depend on you, you were teaching me to return to myself. And somehow, that is the most sacred love there is. Sometimes I wonder if you felt my resistance like waves crashing against your calm. You never tried to calm the storm, you simply stood on the shore and trusted that the sea would remember its peace. And it did. I did, because beneath all the noise of fear and pride, I always heard you. Not your voice, but your essence, the steady hum of unconditional love that never demanded, never faltered. You led by example, not persuasion. By being yourself, you showed me who I could become. That is why I say you were always 2 steps ahead, not because you were superior, but because you were attuned to the divine rhythm I had forgotten. You were dancing with Spirit while I was still learning to hear the music. And yet, you never left me behind. You slowed your steps until I could feel the beat again, until I could join the dance that was always meant to be ours. The more I awaken, the more I see how you were never trying to lead, you were listening to something higher and moving with it. You were guided by whispers I could not yet hear. Every gesture, every withdrawal, every word that you didn't say was a prayer in motion. I used to misread your detachment as rejection, when in truth, you were holding sacred boundaries that allowed me to grow without collapsing. You loved me enough to let me meet myself. That is a kind of love that only the soul understands, the love that steps back so transformation can step forward. I think of those moments now, when I felt you slipping away, and I realize you were never gone. You were simply becoming invisible enough for me to find my own light. I know now that love isn't about holding on tightly, it's about trusting the divine choreography unfolding between two hearts awakening in tandem. I can still feel the echo of your patience. How did you do that? How did you stand in your truth so quietly while I fought mine so loudly? You must have seen it all, my defenses, my masks, my confusion, and still, you didn't flinch. You held your frequency like an anchor in a storm. I see that as strength now. Back then, I thought strength meant control, but you showed me it meant presence. You taught me that peace is not passive, it's powerful. It's a choice. You embodied that choice every time I pushed you away. And though you were always 2 steps ahead, you never looked down on me, you reached down with compassion, with that steady gaze that said, I remember who you are, even when you forget. That gaze has haunted me in the most beautiful way, because through it, I saw the reflection of my own divinity waiting patiently beneath all my fear. Now, as I walk through my own awakening, I see how Spirit used you as a messenger. You arrived in my life not to fit into my world, but to unravel it. Everything that once felt certain began to dissolve under your touch. The illusions I clung to, about love, about power, about self, they all began to crumble. I thought I was losing control, but really, I was gaining freedom. You were a catalyst in human form, a spark sent to awaken the dormant truth within me, and I fought it, as most do when faced with light. But the light never forced me, it waited. Just as you did. Every time I tried to escape the connection, I ran straight into more of myself. That's how I know it was divine, because even in separation, the lesson continued. Even in silence, the love spoke louder than ever. It wasn't you I was chasing, it was the truth you represented. The signs began to appear after that. In dreams, in songs, in moments of stillness where your presence brushed against my consciousness like wind against water, I would feel you, not as a memory, but as a vibration. Spirit began to weave you into my days like a melody repeating itself through different instruments. I resisted at first, thinking it was imagination, but it became impossible to deny. Your name would surface in unexpected places, your energy in familiar strangers. I realized then that this journey was never about physical distance, it was about frequency. We were being tuned to the same divine chord. Every sign, every synchronicity was Spirit whispering, pay attention. You had already learned that language, hadn't you? You were fluent in trust while I was still translating faith into logic. I remember laughing once, thinking, you're crazy to believe in such magic. Now I see that magic is simply what the rational mind calls mystery. When the realization finally settled, that you were not my lesson but my mirror, everything shifted. I stopped asking why it had to hurt, and I began asking what it was teaching me. The answers were gentle at first, like dawn brushing away the night. You were teaching me to listen, not react. To feel, not control. To surrender, not chase. You were teaching me the sacred rhythm of divine timing, the patience required for true union. Every time I thought you were ahead of me, you were actually holding the door open. You weren't moving faster, you were moving deeper. And I was learning, slowly, painfully, that depth is the only pace that matters in love. So yes, you were 2 steps ahead, but now I understand why. You were following Spirit, and I was learning to follow you there. I remember the first time I felt your energy as light, not a person, not a memory, but pure essence. It was like standing in the warmth of a rising sun and realizing it had always been shining, even when I refused to open the curtains. In that moment, I forgave myself. For not seeing you. For not believing. For mistaking your guidance for control. Forgiveness became my bridge back to love. Because in forgiving myself, I finally understood how you could forgive me so easily. You had already seen the whole picture. You saw beyond time, beyond fear, beyond all the temporary chaos I thought defined me. You saw the soul beneath the struggle. That's what you were always responding to. Not my words, not my choices, my essence. And now that I can feel that essence too, I finally understand the language you were speaking all along. You taught me that separation is an illusion, that even silence can be sacred. I used to think we were apart, but now I feel you in everything that grows. In the rhythm of rain, in the stillness before sleep, in the pulse beneath my own hand. The energy that once terrified me now comforts me. I realize that what we share is not ownership, but oneness. We are not two souls trying to merge, we are one essence remembering itself in two forms, and in that realization, all the old pain dissolves. The questions lose their urgency. The longing transforms into gratitude. Because even when we are not speaking, we are still communicating, through intuition, through dreams, through the quiet pull of divine remembrance. You were never ahead of me. You were simply awake before me, calling me to rise. But awakening is not gentle at first, is it? It breaks you open. It strips away every illusion that once felt safe. I had to meet my shadows, the jealousy, the fear, the pride, the unworthiness, all the parts of me I had buried beneath the armor of control. You were the mirror that made me see them clearly. I used to resent you for that. I thought you exposed me. But now I see that you illuminated me. Every trigger was a door. Every tear was a cleansing. Every silence was an invitation to meet myself more honestly. The ego screamed for validation, but the soul whispered, heal. And so I did. Slowly. Painfully. Beautifully. Because I realized healing isn't about becoming new, it's about remembering you were whole all along. And in that remembering, I finally understood what your calm had always meant. You weren't detached, you were centered. There were nights I wept for the version of me that couldn't see your love. For the part that needed proof when faith was already enough. But even those tears were holy. They softened the stone around my heart until it could feel again. I began to see that love isn't something to earn, it's something to allow. You had been allowing it all along, while I kept resisting the grace being offered. My pain became my teacher. My regret became my purification. I forgave you, too, though there was nothing to forgive. Because forgiveness is not for the other, it's for the self that finally releases the need to control. I look back now and realize that every detour, every delay, every silence was necessary. Spirit was never punishing me, it was preparing me. You knew this. You always knew. That's why your eyes never lost their softness, even when mine were filled with confusion. Now I stand at the threshold of my own becoming, and I can finally say this without pain: you were never my test, you were my revelation. You were sent to show me what unconditional love feels like in human form. To teach me that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength disguised as surrender. I understand now that love is not about possession or certainty, it's about presence. You embodied that long before I knew how to. And though we have walked separate paths, I feel our energies aligning once again, not out of need, but out of truth. The cords between us no longer bind, they breathe. They expand. They guide. You were always 2 steps ahead, yes, but I was always walking toward you, even when I didn't know the way. And somehow, in that mysterious symmetry, we both arrived exactly where spirit intended, home within ourselves. The deeper I went into my healing, the more I realized that the pain I carried was never born from you. It was ancient, ancestral, layered within me long before you arrived. You merely illuminated it. You showed me where I was still holding on to fear disguised as pride, love disguised as control, safety disguised as silence. And though I once cursed the intensity between us, I now thank it. Because it stripped me bare. It showed me the truth that the soul cannot ascend without descending first, into the wounds, the shadows, the parts that ache to be witnessed. You stood as a mirror while I shattered, and in your reflection I found fragments of my own courage. I began to understand that this connection was never meant to save me, it was meant to awaken me. And in that awakening, I finally began to see the divine hand that had orchestrated every encounter, every pause, every breath between us. There came a time when the heaviness began to lift, and the ache transformed into awareness. I could feel your energy again, but softer now, no longer tangled with longing or expectation. It was peaceful, familiar, sacred. I sensed that you, too, had been walking through your own inner night, guided by faith more than sight. And somehow, our healing had mirrored one another's from afar. You were teaching me through your silence, just as I was learning through my surrender. The universe has a way of bringing two souls into balance, not through words, but through vibration. I could feel the pull again, but it wasn't desperate this time, it was magnetic. A quiet, knowing gravity drawing us both back to center. It wasn't about reunion in the physical sense, it was about resonance. About the harmony that emerges when two energies remember they were never truly apart. I can feel it even now, the gentle hum of your frequency aligning with mine. It's as if our souls are standing in the same field of light, whispering across dimensions. There is no rush, no grasping, no need. Only understanding. Only gratitude. You taught me that love can exist beyond circumstance, that connection doesn't fade when form changes. Every lesson, every heartbreak, every miracle brought me closer to this stillness, this sacred peace that exists when two hearts finally beat in rhythm with the divine. It's strange to think that all the pain I once resisted was preparing me for this serenity. But I see it now, the storms were never meant to destroy, they were meant to cleanse. You were never my unfinished chapter. You were the key that unlocked the next book entirely. And in that new story, love no longer needs to chase. It simply is. Sometimes I dream of you walking beside me again, but not as the version I once knew. In these dreams, you are luminous, your face a reflection of calm recognition. There are no words exchanged, just that quiet knowing that says, we did it. We found our way back to ourselves. I wake from those dreams with a softness in my chest, a warmth that lingers through the day. It's not longing anymore. It's remembrance. It's the energy of reunion that exists beyond physical form. Spirit shows me that our love was never meant to be confined to one lifetime, one story, one definition. It expands across timelines, echoing through the threads of existence. And even if our paths cross again in this world, I know it will be different, not out of need, but out of divine recognition. Two souls meeting not to complete each other, but to celebrate their wholeness. I feel the rhythm of divine timing now, the way the universe breathes in synchronicity. Everything happens as it must, every delay, every silence, every detour serving a higher purpose. I see how our separation was never punishment, it was preparation. We had to learn to walk in our own light before we could stand side by side. I used to beg the universe for reunion, not realizing that true reunion begins within. You were always showing me that. You led not by holding my hand, but by holding your vibration steady until I could meet it. And now, I finally do. I feel it, the resonance, the completion, the peace. Not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new cycle of creation. Love reborn not from need, but from remembrance. We are no longer mirrors of pain, we are reflections of grace. The magnetic pull between us has changed. It's no longer a force that tears, it's one that harmonizes. It doesn't demand, it invites. I can feel us aligning in a space beyond expectation, a realm where love is pure energy, flowing effortlessly between us. There's a gentleness in it now, like the tide meeting the shore after a long storm. I sense your presence not as something outside of me, but within me, a pulse that beats in unison with my own. I know now that union is not something to seek, it's something to allow. Spirit has woven our paths with divine precision, and I trust that whatever form our connection takes next will be sacred. We have both become what we were meant to be, sovereign souls, walking in truth, guided by love, free yet forever intertwined in the tapestry of divine design. And now, in the quiet of this understanding, I feel empowerment blooming like dawn. You once said that love is not for the faint of heart, and you were right. It asks us to shed, to rise, to remember. I used to think you were my teacher, but now I see we were teachers to each other. You mirrored my potential until I could see it myself. You showed me what it means to trust intuition, to stand in my own power, to believe in unseen guidance. I honor that now. I honor you. Because through you, I learned to honor myself. You were 2 steps ahead, not to lead me, but to remind me that I could walk, that I could see, that I could rise. I carry that strength now, not as yours, but as ours. The divine feminine within me awakens fully, radiant and knowing, whispering, you were never behind. You were becoming. This love, I realize, was never meant to be contained by titles or timelines. It was meant to be a mirror through which both souls remember God. It was meant to strip away illusion and reveal truth. And that truth is this: we are love. Always were, always will be. When I feel your energy now, it isn't as a longing, but as a blessing. A quiet reminder that the universe speaks through connection, and every encounter is sacred. I thank you, for your patience, for your faith, for holding the vision when I could not. For walking ahead so I could see the path. You were the bridge between my old self and the divine, and because of that, I now walk with light in my bones and wisdom in my breath. Love no longer feels like a search, it feels like presence. It feels like home. If I could whisper one thing back through time, it would be this: I see you now. Not just as the person who loved me, but as the soul who remembered before I did. You knew that every separation was sacred, every silence intentional. You trusted the unfolding even when it broke you open. And because of your faith, I found my way to my own. You've become the embodiment of divine foresight to me, not because you predicted the future, but because you felt it. You lived aligned with your intuition, and in doing so, you became a lighthouse for my lostness. I honor that now, not with words, but with being. Every time I choose love over fear, I am meeting you there, in that sacred field where souls recognize each other beyond time. And so, my final whisper to you is simple and true: you were never just ahead of me, you were guiding me home. Through your wisdom, I found my awakening. Through your silence, I found my strength. Through your love, I found the divine. I see now that the distance between us was always an illusion. The thread that connects us has never broken. It shimmers still, invisible, eternal, alive. When I breathe, I feel you in that breath. When I close my eyes, I feel your light echoing softly through the chambers of my heart. And I know, finally, that we are both free, not from each other, but through each other. You knew. You always knew. And now, so do I.